Today is December 7th, 2018. My name is Maggie Rivas Rodriguez. I'm interviewing David Oliveira for the Voces Oral History Project. We're in McAllen, Texas, and we're actually in your office building. So thank you so much, David, for allowing us to talk to you today.
No, it's my pleasure, and thank you for coming down here and doing this great work.
Yeah, thank you. So let me start off a little bit with your childhood. Your father was, I guess your family was very well known in Brownsville. Tell us a little bit about that.
So my parents were both educators, and my dad was first in his family to graduate from college. In fact, all his brothers pulled together their money, and so he could go to University of Texas. And he was at the University of Texas in the 40s when there were very few Hispanics. In fact, he lived in a house called the HA House. It was the Hispanic American House. It's where the School of Communications is now. And it was, I can remember going there, when we were young and to football games, and we'd always go by the house to see, I think her name was Mrs. Hinojosa, that ran the house, and there was a house mother. But they had to have a house because there were not many housing opportunities available for Hispanics in Austin, and there were very few places that would rent to Hispanics, and so they decided to do this house, and so a lot of the few Hispanics from the valley, they made it up, would live in this house, and to this day, all those people are have had successful careers: pharmacists, bankers, doctors, and so my dad had that opportunity to go to school because of his brothers. My mom, on the other hand, was one of 5 sisters. Grew up in a little farming community just north of Brownsville, Los Indios, and her parents were very big on education. They were not formally educated, but they wanted all their kids to be educated. And so I say the 5 sisters, or 4 sisters, all 4 sisters were told, you're going to college, and they all became teachers. And so my mom and dad met right when they got out of college at a place called elementary school called La Encantada, and there on the military highway. And they got married 2 years later and had six children, 5 boys and 1 girl, and I'm the second oldest child.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your mom, where did she go to college?
She went to Texas A&I in Kingsville. Back then it was hard to leave the valley, but she couldn't get. We didn't have a 4-year college in Brownsville at the time. We had Texas Southmost College, that was it, and your choice was to go to Edinburgh, and Texas A&I back then was really good at recruiting kids from the valley, students from the valley, and so she went there, and her sisters were there, and so she got out of there in 4 years and started a long career as an elementary school teacher. My dad, on the other hand, started as an elementary school teacher, became an assistant principal at Brownsville High School, then became a principal of an intermediate school, Stella Intermediate School, and then 2 years later became the first Hispanic principal of Brownsville High School. And I think in his last year there, it was the largest high school in the nation, had like 5,000 students. And in 67 and 68, he and my mom decided that the best way to further his career was for him to get his PhD, and Brownsville Independent School District, the school board had told him, if you go off and get your PhD, we'll make you superintendent. And so the irony is that they had never had a Hispanic superintendent, and the man he was going to replace was, I don't even know if he had a master's degree, but he was white, and it was okay to have a white superintendent. And traditionally superintendents, their background was that they were coaches from West Texas, and for some reason they became superintendents all over South Texas. But they told him, and the irony is that I think the board was predominantly Hispanic at the time, but they didn't feel comfortable making the first Hispanic superintendent, appointed unless he had a doctorate. And so that was, I think, comfort for them, so that people couldn't criticize him. And so he went off to get his doctorate and came back 2 years later, but the board changed hands and people left, and so they appointed somebody else who didn't have a doctorate degree. So Dad taught he came for a year to Edinburgh and was in charge of the student teaching program. And then the presidency of Texas Southmost College opened up, and that board was predominantly Anglo, but they liked my dad, and they were, they knew my dad and knew him when he was principal, and they liked him, and that predominantly Anglo board said we want a Hispanic as president. So you have to give credit, because I know there are a lot of Hispanics who promoted other Hispanics, but a lot of the breaks that my dad and others got, were from, the Anglo community that saw the importance of having a Hispanic, president. And so he became president of Texas Southmost College in 1972, served there until 76, and then he became president of what was then Pan American University, Brownsville. It was an upper level institution, 2-year college, or junior and senior institution on the Texas Southmost College campus. And then in 1980, he was rumored to be, and I've been told by many of the board members, he was their top choice to be president of Pan American University, Edinburgh, but he died of a heart attack that year, and so he, very young age at 51, and so he never, that never happened. But the gentleman who got the presidency, Dr. Miguel Nevadas, told me many times that he says, if your dad had lived, he'd be the president, and I've been working for him, and he goes, I would have been very happy. So my dad did, accomplished a lot in a very short time, but he did die very young. So
where did he get his PhD?
From University of Texas. So
in
education? Yes, in education. So he left in '67. My mom with 6 kids and said, take care of them, and she was making $600 a month, and so we all worked.
So that must have been really hard for your family.
It was, because we were very close, and it was hard not having him there. And so I think I was 12 or 13, and so in my family's kind of funny. The first 4 of us were born in May, a year apart, and it wasn't a coincidence. My parents were educators. We were all born in May, so my parents, they had no problems producing children, and so they would always plan and said, okay, we're gonna have these kids in May, and so the first 4 of us were born in May, and we were a year apart. But when he left, we were, I think, ranging in ages from 9 to 13, and so the 3 boys all got paper routes, and I took 2 paper routes, and so we could help mom, because there was no money for clothes, there was money for food, but there was no money for clothes and anything else we wanted. So that's how we support ourselves. Interestingly, we lived in a 2-bedroom house, 8 of us. I never thought we were poor, but when I take my kids by that house now, they think, God, Dad, you lived in a shack, and it's just back then it was a modest home. And
Yes, this David, how did it shape your thinking about kind of how Mexican Americans are treated in Texas? The experience that your dad went through.
I sit back because while it's been difficult for our generation, to get ahead and succeed, it was nothing like what our parents went through. And when you think about the obstacles, when I was at University of Texas, some of the biggest obstacles were you couldn't get into fraternities and sororities, unless you were white. You had to have your own. In fact, we formed our own fraternity with guys from the Valley and the Phi Caps, and it was all Mexicanos from the Valley. But I saw what my dad went through, and he would always share those stories with us, and he was never bitter about it. He just said, the reason you don't, and he would tell us, because we would ask, how come there's no Hispanics that are college presidents besides you? How come you don't see Hispanics in leadership positions? And he says, because there have been so many obstacles put in front of us, and it's hard for to get away to school, and and most of us, he goes, most of my friends grew up poor, and so we didn't. When they got out of high school, their parents needed them to go work and help support the family, and he goes, and finally there were families like his that said, it's more important to sacrifice and get our children educated. And so I think, having watched him go through those struggles, it gave me a greater appreciation of what he had to go through, and realized how lucky he is. I tell people all the time, because, we had lunch with Alonso Cantu today. He had a tough childhood, and he was a migrant worker, and he had to work real hard. And despite all that, he overcame all that, and because he did have strong parents also that encouraged him to go to school. But I tell people I had a charmed life. I really did. My parents were both college educated. There were very few Hispanics, and when I was growing up, that had even one parent who was college educated, and I had 2. And so I tell everybody, my parents were the Mexican version of Ozzie and Harriet. They gave us a wonderful childhood, and they supported us, and I often feel like I'm an underachiever because I had such great parents, and that I should have been a nuclear physicist or a Nobel Peace Prize winner with the parents I had. So, but I do have a great appreciation of how hard it was for Mexicanos in the 40s, to get a college education and to succeed.
So, I think a lot of times people think that Mexican Americans along the border, that they're totally empowered. And then they'll hear stories like this, like what was going on in Brownsville, and they'll realize that's not the case, that there was still discrimination.
It's not, and you still, and now that I've been out and I'm on a bank board and stuff, I've seen the discrimination in business. I mean, I think one of the reasons, you saw Lone Star Bank formed here was formed by a group of 5 Hispanic leaders that said, we want our own bank because it was hard to get loans. I mean, it's hard to be successful in business if you don't have a banker who will lend you money. And the Anglo community here all had their own banks, and they had no trouble getting money. And for the young Hispanic who wanted to start a business or a construction company or whatever, it was very difficult. So Lone Star Bank was formed with that idea in mind, and it's been wildly successful. And so now those opportunities are there, but there's still some doors that are closed, even in the Rio Grande Valley. You see it, and you see it at some of the country clubs and stuff. I think they're trying harder, but I'm a member of Mac Allen Country Club, and it's still probably, I think it's 80-90% Anglos and stuff. And you think, how can that be in an area that's 90% Hispanic? But I see it improving, and I was welcomed there. I mean, but you still see those pockets, even in the Rio Grande Valley, and especially in the business community, that it's tough for Hispanics to break in, but it's gotten a lot better.
So your family, when you went to UT. And tell me about creating the Phi Caps, or how did that work?
So that had actually started it probably 4 or 5 years before. It was a bunch of guys from the Valley, and it was Congressman De La Garza's son, Jorge De La Garza, he just retired as a cardiovascular surgeon here. It was the Bellas, Danny and Pablo Bella, who, interestingly enough, whose father roomed with my father at the HA house. We didn't discover this till we came to UT, and so they started this fraternity because they wanted, that kind of to have, that available to them too, the socialization, and getting together with your friends. And so they started it, and it was, I think we were like, the pledge class I was in was 14 Mexicanos and 1 Peruvian Jew who spoke better Spanish than all of us, and it's not that we would have kept Anglos from joining a fraternity, just none wanted to, and but that gave us an opportunity to enjoy that kind of life. And we didn't have a house because we couldn't afford one, but we had a great time. And the irony is that and I was told by somebody there, and there was I'm trying to remember who it was that was in the admissions office at the University of Texas for a long time. He was an assistant admissions director, but he told me one time that we had the highest GPA on campus of any fraternity, because everybody in that fraternity went on to become a professional of some sort, whether it was a pharmacist, a doctor. I think in my pledge class, I think there were 5 doctors, 3 or 4 lawyers, and pharmacists and successful business people. So, and I think and that's why having access to fraternities and things like that are important, because the networking you can do is incredible. I mean, and so we were lucky we were able to do that. I think that's one thing that hasn't changed at UT, because my daughter was in a sorority there, but she's very light complected, and she's my stepdaughter, and so her name is Schnorr, and so she didn't have any trouble getting in. But I noticed in her sorority there were no Hispanics, and of course no African Americans. So while some things have changed at the University of Texas, some things have stayed the same, and who knows if they'll ever change. But it was an interesting time.
So the Phi Caps, is that part of a national? Is that a national?
Yes, it's a national fraternity.
And so why did they choose Phi Caps? I mean, it's not all Mexicanos all over?
No, it isn't. It isn't. I think it was probably one of the fraternities that was still that had not been started on campus, and so you have to, and so we couldn't join any of the others, so you had to find one that did not have an organization on campus, and so I think that's why it was started. And I believe it was started probably 3 or 4 years before I got there, because I remember I was in that fraternity with guys who started it, Rick Chapa and some other people, I think, from the Valley that had started it. So the guys that I'm friends with to this day, and we and now with social media, we're able to hook up with the ones that are not in town on Facebook, and I run into them in Austin occasionally on game day and stuff. But everybody's been very successful. I mean, everybody's done
So
well.
what high school did you go to?
They went to the only high school in Brownsville at the time. It was called Brownsville High School, and it's now there's, I think, 6 high schools in Brownsville. That's how big it's gotten. But at the time, it was the only high school, and then my dad was president of Texas Southwest College, and he says, "Okay, give me a year here, and then you can go off to University of Texas." So everybody in my family spent at least 1 year at Texas Southwest. I think some spent 2, and then we transferred on, and then 2 of my brothers are doctors, and so but everybody went to the University of Texas in Austin, and then on to medical school. Or that I have a brother's an engineer also, so yeah, thanks to our parents, we got a great formative years, and it was never a question, are you going to college? The question is like, you're going to college, and what are you going to do after you get out of college? And for some,
what was your major in?
My major was I was a government major. I love politics, and University of Texas has one of the best political science departments, in the United States. And we had Professor Elspeth Rostow and Joe Franz, who used to be LBJ's press secretary. And I mean, it's incredible the access, you had University of Texas to great professors and, great leaders. And so I really enjoyed my time there. I enjoyed, the political science classes I took.
So were there a lot of kids from the Valley that went up to UT?
When I was there was a fair amount. I mean, I think from Brownsville, there was probably, 15 or 20 that I remember that went, and then I met a lot of kids from McAllen, so it was a sizable population from the Valley that went there, and now it's even larger. But there was also a lot of Hispanics from like surrounding communities around San Antonio, like Devine, like where you grew up in Pleasanton, and Dilley. I remember I met the Carpinteros from Dilley that went there, and so there was, and we all seemed to find each other, because even then, I mean, I doubt that there were 2,000 Hispanics on campus back there when we were at school. I mean, there were even that many, but so we all kind of knew everybody, and
How did you find each other?
That I remember they had I think it was at the student union they had Chicano night, and so I remember that's where I met, I think, Sonia and Javier Perez. They were from Javier was from Uvalde, and Sonia was from the San Antonio area, but her parents were from Devine, as I was telling you, and so that's how I met a lot of people there. They had other Tejano nights and other things that we'd get together, and you just kind of find each other. You see each other on campus, and then when you see other Mexicanos in class, and you'd always want to meet them, because you knew it was how tough it was, and we all helped each other, and it was a kind of a tight knit community there, and it was great because you had that support, and for a lot of those kids, especially the ones that didn't have the luxury of having 2 parents that were educated, college educated, it was great that they had that support group that they could hang out with, and if they ran out of food, we all shared. I mean, it's like we some of my friends would tell me, God, I didn't get my check this month, financial aid or whatever, and I said, come on over, and by that time I was working in the state legislature, so I was rich, man. I was making $1,000 a month, and actually it was $950 a month. And I always had money, and I was not afraid to share it with my friends.
What were you doing there?
Yeah, I started out as a legislative aide. Ruben Torres from Brownsville was a state rep, and he's a former superintendent of Port Isabel Schools and ran for state rep. And I was kind of running as the Austin office, the Capitol office. And he had a chief of staff, but the chief of staff left, I think, in the middle of the session, and he was looking for somebody else, and then finally one day he saw that I could write, that I had good political skills, and he goes, "Why don't you be my chief of staff?" And I thought, great. And chief of staff before I was making $3,000 a month. I thought I was going to get $3,000 a month. I got $950, but I didn't complain because he let me go to school full time. And God, what an incredible experience for a 19-year-old kid to be a chief of staff, for a state legislator. And so I worked there one session. And then when I graduated, I think I worked for him 2 years, and then he went on to become chairman of the board of pardons and paroles, and I worked for him for a year there. But it was a great experience, and some of the contacts I met, back then, Len Agaretto, who went on to become a railroad commissioner, and then Ron Kirk went on to become mayor of Dallas. We all worked at the Capitol together, and I met, Gary Morrow back then. He was involved in the state Democratic Party, and just met a lot of different people. And it was, it was just one of those, for me, it was just the opportunity of a lifetime. And those contacts I made back then, and to this day, have served me incredibly well, and made some wonderful friendships, and met a lot of people. So it's.
So David, did you kind of feel like that's what you wanted to do, something related to politics? Is that how you?
I did, and I worked actually for the state Democratic Party. I jokingly tell people I was the number 2 person at the state party, but there were only 3 of us. Better take a break. I saw my banker came in. I'm just going to tell him. Yeah, and I'll tell her just to.
Will you help with that?
I saw Federico walk in, but I'll be with him in a little bit. But if you can, just tell everybody no knocking until I finish the interview. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Lynette.
You gonna come in? Yeah. So where were we?
I think we were talking about
You were
politics.
politics.
Yeah. So I worked at the state Democratic Party, and jokingly told people I was the number 2 person, but then I tell them there was only 3 of us back then, and the secretary there would have said she was before I was, that she was more powerful, and she would have been right, but that was another fascinating experience. I got to work the 78 elections for governor, and that's of course when Democrats lost power, so wasn't a happy time. It's when Bill Clements won for the first time, beat John Hill, and it was the first time Republicans have won in I think since Reconstruction, and so got to do that. I thought that was I was gonna make a career out of politics, and had an opportunity to work some presidential campaigns, but then just decided, no, I want to go to law school. I want to make money. And I laugh because, Gary Morrow, has told me often that we have a mutual friend, Jose Villarreal, who's done very well. And Jose pursued a political career. And, and I tell you, and Jose will tell you he had many rough years because you don't make a lot of money doing that, but Jose stuck with it. I mean, he persevered. I didn't because I was more interested in making money at that point, and I didn't. But I still am involved, and I'm not involved obviously on the level that Jose is, and Jose's done fabulously well. And but I could sometimes I wonder if I stuck with it like Jose did, what I would be doing now, and who knows? I mean, but I have no regrets. I stay involved. I've been involved in presidential campaigns and gubernatorial campaigns, and was somewhat involved in this last U.S. Senate campaign. So
you after you finished UT, you came back to the Valley. For how long?
I came back. I took some time off, and actually, it's funny because it's another different part of my life. But came back. My dad wanted me to teach school, and I did for a semester, and then he passed away at the end of that semester. And I thought I was making I was on an emergency certificate, they call it. I was making like $800 a month, and I said I can't survive on this, and so I became a nightclub manager for a short time in my life. And it's funny how it worked out. I really had no intention of doing that. I was working there part-time because I couldn't make enough money, $800 a month. I was single, but it just wasn't enough to survive, and so I would work at the nightclub part-time, and then when the general manager quit, they made me general manager and paid me all this money. I did it for a year. Thankfully, the peso devaluation happened, and they closed down the nightclub, and because I might not have never left there. I'm joking, and then I went into television for a while. I had a cousin, Ron Oliveira, who was wildly successful on KGBT Channel 4, and so they asked me to audition for the sportscaster job. I did. I got it, and then remember they told me, if you're 1/10 as talented as your cousin is, you'll be very successful in this business. And I was like, barely 1/10 as talented as he was, but I had a good time. I had a great time, and then moved on after that. And then I went to work in Austin for Gary Morrow for a couple of years, and then Gary said, "You need to go back to law school."
What was Gary's position at that
He was a general land commissioner. And Gary and I had met because Gary was the executive director of the State Democratic Party after I left there, and we had gotten to know each other. And then when Gary ran for land commissioner, I think he ran at the same time Ann Richards ran for treasurer, and it was a great slate of candidates. I think John Sharp ran, for comptroller. All these we got these new faces in, and so I helped Gary, and we became close friends. And so after working for him, I think, well, that's the other thing I almost forgot is I worked for the county judge of Cameron County. Is that after I left the TV station, he was looking for a chief of staff, and so Moises Vela, who's from a very well-known family, the Vela family. His brother was Philemon Vela, who's a federal judge, and very successful family, and so I became his chief of staff. Did that for a year. While I was working for him, Gary came down campaigning and said, "Hey, we got a huge U.S. Senate campaign coming up. Bob Kruger's going to run against for I guess it must have been an open spot, and Phil Gramm was a congressman who was running on the Republican side. So Bob ran against Ken Hansen, Lloyd Doggett, and it was one of the closest races ever in Texas. 900 votes separated the top three candidates out of 3 million votes cast or whatever. And so Kruger ended up being the odd man out of the runoff, and then and so I didn't have a job. I mean, my candidate lost. I thought I was going to go to Washington D.C. and become a legislative aide, and so Gary was nice enough to hire me at the General Land Office, and I did that for a year, and then decided it was time to go to law school, so I did.
So it was Gary was the one who suggested to you that?
Yeah, he did. He's always been a mentor to me, and he said, you really, because he knew I was interested in a legal career. Interesting, enough, the top school I wanted to go to, of course, was University of Texas. They put me on a waiting list, and I was already, I think I was already, 25, and I was like, actually I was 27. And I didn't want to wait, and so I got into 4 other schools: U of H, I think St. Mary's. It was either SMU or Baylor, and then Texas Tech. And I told Gary, I said, "Look, Gary, I don't have any money. My dad's passed away. My mom can't help me. If I wanted to go to U of H, and that was my second choice, and can you give me a job there?" He goes, "I don't have any openings there." He goes, "Where else did you get accepted?" And I said, "Lubbock, San Antonio." He goes, "I got an opening in Lubbock." And so that's how I ended up in school out there. And it was a great law school, and actually they had there was a fair number of Hispanics. They surprisingly, at West Texas School, you would have thought, but they had, I think in our class of 180, there were probably 20 or 30 Hispanic students, which back then was a lot.
So what did you do for the land office there?
There was a veterans land office there, and so I took care of the veterans loans and stuff while I worked there part-time. And you were banned from working your first year of law school, but I stuck out every day. And at one time, one of my professors saw me downtown, asked me what I was doing, and I said, "I just came to pick up something downtown." And then I ran into him again about 2 weeks later. He goes, "Sure is coincidental that I've run into you twice down here." And he goes, "Are you working somewhere for a law office?" I said, No. I just came down to get something." And thankfully, he didn't turn me in or anything, because they could have made me stop working. And it's done because they want you to dedicate your time and effort because they know how hard the curriculum is. But got out in 3 years and worked in the district attorney's office for a year, and then I just had some offers to go with some big firms, but I always knew I wanted to come back home, and so I did. We came back home in '89.
So you were married by this time?
Yes, I married and 2 children from my first marriage, and so we came back to the Valley because we wanted Grandma's help and my mom's help, and so we did, and I started at the firm I'm with now, and I'm now one of the senior partners. But my cousin Rene Oliveira had been with the firm for 6 or 7 years, and I'd interviewed other places. He says, no, you need to come work here. This is, we're a growing firm. We have more Hispanics in this firm than any firm in the Valley. And so when we started, there was about, 7 or 8 of us, and now we're 22 lawyers and, one of the top law firms in the Valley. And, we've done incredibly well and got a lot of breaks along the way. You talk about, there was the Anglo community, of course, controlled most of the businesses, and that's where a lot of the legal work was. And we had a lot of friends, along the way, like Bobby Ferris, the Ferrises in Harlingen, that would hire us to represent them, and which was against the conventional wisdom. Almost everybody back then had Anglo lawyers, and even though the juries were Hispanic, but Bobby was like light years ahead of the rest of his colleagues, and he always used to. I asked him one time, so why do you hire us? I mean, we're good lawyers, but why don't you go to the old Anglo firms in Harlingen and Brownsville? And he goes, because I want my lawyer to look like the jury. And he was smart. He was ahead of his time, and plus also he was just an open-minded guy. He was a good guy, and he didn't grow up. As he had a wonderful dad and taught him to be treat everybody equally. And so you don't forget people like that. And every time I see Bobby, I always give him a hug, and he knows why I'm giving him a hug.
So tell me about your political involvement, because you've worked on lots of campaigns at the national, at the state, and local levels. So
when I worked at the state Democratic Party, and worked at the legislature, and that opportunity, to meet people at the legislative level, it's all the same people. It's funny. It's just like you were in journalism and newspapers, and it's a small community. You knew everybody. You knew R.G. Ratcliffe. You knew Sam Adderley. All the people back then were in journalism, and it was kind of a similar deal in politics. It was pretty much the same core of people. Back then it was Gary Morrow, Roy Spence from GSD&M, a lot of different people that ran these campaigns, and so they would stay in touch. And so when I was working at the state party, Bob Kruger was running against John Tower at the time, and his campaign borrowed me from the state party to travel with him, so I got to travel with Bob in South Texas and other places, and met a lot of people. Bob lost by 1/3 of a percentage point, or maybe 1/2 a percentage point, to John Tower. And if Ramsey Muniz, the Raza Unida candidate, hadn't run, I think he pulled like a little under a percentage, and those votes would have probably gone to Bob Kruger, and he would have been elected. But so I got to know the Kruger campaign and Bob, and so in '84 when he ran again, Gary said, I need you to come back, work for the campaign. And so I did. I went full time and enjoyed it. We great run, but we fell a little short. And then there was a period I got away from politics because I had to get through law school, had established my law practice. But then when Bill Clinton ran for office, Gary Morrow called me, and Gary and Bill were very close. And ironically, I'd met the Clintons when I was 16 years old at a campaign, at a rally to register farm workers, and it was in San Juan. And I said West ago earlier, but I'm remembering that was San Juan. And Gary Morrow was there. He was the statewide director for the McGovern campaign, and then Bill Clinton and Hillary were like the regional directors of the campaign, and so got to meet the Clintons back then. And so when Bill ran for presidency, Gary said, "Hey, we've got to help this guy out." And I said, Gary, President Bush has 78% popularity rating. I mean, he's off the charts. We just had a successful war, a successful outcome to the war, the Persian Gulf War, and his ratings were so high, his approval ratings. I said, does this guy have a chance? And I remember Gary telling me, the economy's not doing well, and people tend to vote their pocketbooks. He goes, so that popularity will it'll wear off, and he was right. And Clinton preached the same message. Our economy's not doing well. We need to focus on the economy. And lo and behold, a year later, he gets elected. But when he announced in Hope, Arkansas. I think his second stop was Laredo, Texas. And then his third and fourth stop were Brownsville and McAllen. And I put those events together for him. And the Clintons, have an incredible memory. And so they kept track. Yeah, everybody that supported, everybody that raised money for him, those early races. And so I had a long relationship when they were in the White House with him. Got invited there many times to meetings and to briefings and to social events as well. And so, the period when the Clintons were in the White House, I was very active in Democratic Party fundraising and in other events. And when we lost, when Al Gore did not get elected, I kind of fell off the radar there for a while too. I was disappointed as well. I think there were a number of things that caused me to drop out of that scene for a while. One was the Clintons losing, but also Governor Ann Richards, who was a dear friend, and when she lost the governorship, I kind of got soured on politics. And then when Democrats lost, all the statewide elections, I forget which year it was. It was the year I think Paul Hobby and John Sharp lost, and then I kind of fell off the political radar there for a while. But in the last, I think 8 to 10 years, I've been active again, and I'm a part of a large group now of Hispanics that fundraise and that help try to track and recruit good candidates and support good candidates when we get them, and so we still stay active.
Is there a name for this group?
No, it's just it's a bunch of old guys like me that realize the importance of electing like-minded candidates and people that will support higher education and support the programs that our community needs to get ahead and in this world. And so I'm encouraged by what happened this last election. For the first time in a long time, I'm very optimistic, and amazingly, a lot of my moderate Republican friends have told me, said, this is not a bad thing, because they were upset at how conservative their party had gotten. If I had a nickel for every time they told me this is not the Republican Party I grew up with, and I'd be a wealthy man, because they were disillusioned with their own party. I was amazed at how many of them were, probably voted for Beto O'Rourke, and because they were tired of the politics of Ted Cruz and some of this, these Tea Party, politics that we've seen in the last 8 to 10 years. So I try to stay active. I can continue to raise money when I can, and after you've been doing this a while, of course your name gets on the database, and it's not the staff that calls you anymore. If you give enough money, raise enough money, then the actual candidates call you. And it's so hard to tell a candidate no. So I tell my wife we're gonna die poor because we give all our money away, but we're gonna die happy because we help make a difference. And
let me ask you this, David. Has your role in politics been, and I'm not someone from politics, but I know the fundraising part, and I know that you've been very successful with that. And organizing events, have you been involved in the strategizing and helping them shape messages? And I don't even know if that's something that...
On a smaller scale, I have, and I have been consulted from time to time on, and I think on higher education issues more than anything else, because I served 18 years on a college board of trustees, and my dad was a college president. So I do get, calls from time to time, what are the issues, what are the pressing issues, and when candidates, are putting together their platforms and stuff, I have been, called by friends who are helping run their campaigns. So do some of that, and then, some of it is just, strategic, who do we need to, who do we need to line up as, to endorse us and things like that. I used to do a lot of that. That was like a big deal. So when a candidate decided they were going to run, they would, ask me to help them get endorsements, and so we would, we'd work on key people, and because early on in the campaign, if you can get those endorsements and people see you've got, strong backing, then the money comes, and you're able to raise money when they see that you've got a strong base of support.
And has that been on a volunteer basis or just like a paid?
Strictly volunteer. Thankfully my legal business is thriving, and I really couldn't take a leave of absence. I mean, there was a couple of times where I thought I might go work on a campaign, and once you start having children, it's impossible to do. And so plus there's a lot of young people out there that have the time and effort and to put into, because it is a full-time and a half job. A political campaign, I mean, it's I compare it, it's almost like the people that are running campaigns are like head football coaches. During football season, the head football coach, he doesn't, he gets out, leaves the house at 5 in the morning and gets back at 10 or 11 at night. It's the same thing with political campaigns, because it's such a short time period, and you're working 18-hour days, and I think that's why you see a lot of young people running campaigns, because it is it's a tough job. But we've got a lot of talented young people come up, and I'm also encouraged by how many Hispanics I see that have roles in campaigns now. I mean, I see it's there's a lot more Hispanics that are involved at all different levels. I mean, Bertino hosted the state party chair. His daughter was one of Hillary's top people. There's also a young lady, Laura Pena from Harlingen, who was very prominent in Hillary's campaign, and she both times that Hillary ran, and so I'm just encouraged by the number of Hispanics I see now that have prominent roles in campaigns. And I think there was even for a short period of time there was a Hispanic lady that was running Hillary's campaign. I'm pretty sure it was this last time around. It might have been the first time around when she ran against Obama and lost. But it's that's, I think the one thing I've seen is that at least and even with Republican candidates now, I see they have a lot of Latinos that are working there. I mean, they understand the future of the state. The Republican politicians that understand the landscape. I mean, they know how important the Hispanic vote is, and you can see they're trying to bring lots of Hispanics in. And the problem they have is that a lot of their views are not shared by most Hispanics, and so we're seeing a little bit of a shift now. The other thing I thought was interesting, and I had Henry Cisneros is a good friend, and he came down. We had a luncheon, and we had some young Hispanic doctors there. They were asking, why is it that there are so many Hispanics, backing Republicans now, young Hispanic business leaders, and a lot of these guys they're not ultra conservative, they're not Tea Party guys. And Henry's observation was they want to be relevant, and the Democratic Party has not been relevant in Texas for a long time, and so if you want to make a difference, if you want to be, with the people that are making decisions that are in charge of the state, you had to become Republican to. I think this last election now has opened the eyes of a lot of these people, and I think a lot of those young business people, those young doctors, other people that have gone to the Republican Party, I think a lot of them are going to come back and be happy to do so, because they see now that for the first time in a long time that Democrats have a chance, and so it's going to be the next couple of years are going to be very interesting for the Democratic Party in Texas, but also for Hispanics in Texas, because I see as things start to shift. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities for Hispanics to head campaigns, to run for office, and you saw it this year. Gina Ortiz Jones, I think, was wildly successful. I mean, came within just 700 votes of winning, and I think she's going to be a candidate next time. And I think you're going to see people now are emboldened. It used to be everybody didn't think we had a chance. They didn't want to waste their time, but they saw how close we came. I think you're going to see a really good slate of candidates in 2 years, and maybe a Hispanic running for U.S. Senator or some of the other top positions that are open.
Do you, if you were to put a dollar amount on how much money you've raised for candidates for campaigns? I know that maybe it's hard.
I used to know, it's funny, at one time I could probably do it. ironically enough, in '92 when I raised money for President Clinton had a visit, and I think back then it was I forgot which committee it was, whether it was a National Democratic fundraising committee. But I raised, I went to a meeting with some of the wealthiest people in the state and the wealthiest Democratic donors, and they were all talking. Back then, it was 100,000 was the number they wanted everybody to raise, and if you raised 100,000, you were in an elite group, for the president and stuff. And I said, I can't raise 100,000, guys. And they said, if you can just raise 20,000 in South Texas, we'd never raise money down there. You'll be a hero. Well, I raised 40, and so I got a seat at the table with President Clinton his first visit back to Texas, and I laughed at him because I told my colleagues on the committee, I said, some of you guys raised like 250, and I shouldn't be here at this table, and they laughed. They said, we're happy you are because we're glad that you're well. The money I raised, it pales in comparison to what Alonso Cantu has raised in South Texas. He's become one of the most prominent Hispanic fundraisers in the country. And in fact, the Wall Street Journal, when Hillary ran, not this past time, but the first time against Obama, called him one of the top bundlers he was able to raise, I think, over $1 million for her campaign. But if I had to guess, over the years for different candidates and stuff, it's probably been 3 or 4 million. And that's from everything from statewide candidates to local candidates to, I would say I've helped raise that kind of money. But it's been over a long time, and I will say probably the last 10 to 15 years have been a lot. More of that money, that I've raised more money during that time period than the first 10 or 15 because it was so hard back then to raise any money. And now you see candidates raising a lot of money down here and candidates coming down here because they could raise money down here.
What has changed?
I think what has changed is that and I'll give Alonso Cantu a lot of the credit because Alonso came up with this great business model. He has. He's helped out so many Hispanic business people that he's just got this loyal group of followers, and he's not afraid to ask them for money or ask them to give back, whether it's for his organization that raises money for Hispanic scholarships, or whether it's for raising money for candidates that will support the issues that we feel strongly about. He's just done a great job, and so he has a group of professionals, and he of course he is one of the majority owners, top investors in a very successful doctors-owned hospital. He has his own bank. He's the biggest investor in a $2 billion bank, and he's got a mortgage company. He now has a minor league basketball team. He's got a soccer team, a minor league soccer team, and so he has a lot of different things. And so he has a group of people that have been very loyal to him, and he's been successful in raising money. And the best thing about that is that he's got us a seat at the table now. And so thanks to people like Alonso and others that have helped raise money, is that they do ask us, what do you need down here, or before they make a decision on whether it's immigration, whatever, they consult us and say, what do you guys want? And in the past we were never at the table, but now South Texas has a voice, and you see a difference. And of course now with the 4-year university that we have, and I know your focus is a little bit on politics, but I got to tell you, my true love is higher education, and I got that from my dad. And I told you earlier that probably my only regret in life is that I didn't become a university president like him. I actually had a chance. I was interviewed I was asked to interview to become a dean of a law school, and wasn't a good time for me, and I turned it down. But I spent a lot of time in higher education, and we've fought so hard over the years. And of course, Dr. Juliet Garcia, who my dad hired, was one of his students in high school, and then he convinced her to come back to Brownsville to work at the college. And of course, she went on to become president of the Texas Southmost College, president of UT Brownsville when it was an upper level institution, and then president of UT Brownsville when it was a 4-year institution. But we we fought that battle for so long to try and get a four-year university. And I was chairman of the Texas Southwest College Board when we went to the legislature, and I'll never forget, we went to the coordinating board, and we told him we wanted a four-year university. And at that time, Kenneth Ashworth was the chair. Kenneth had been the chair of the coordinating board, or not the chair, he's probably executive director, when my dad was president. And I remember my dad would go, and Kenneth would always say, we don't have the money, we don't have the money. But my dad would wear him down, and eventually he would find the money to help Texas Southwest College. So when we went in 96, we wanted to become a four-year university, and the legislature and the higher education the coordinating board had said no more four-year universities. And so I remember testifying and met with a lot of resistance, and the coordinating board would, they were sympathetic, but they wouldn't back our move. But we filed the bill anyway, and my cousin Renee Oliveira was on the higher education committee. But I can remember testifying before the Senate Higher Education Committee, and I forget who the senator was, but he was from West Texas. And his question to me was, why do you want a four-year university? You've already got one down there. And I said, well, I beg your pardon, that we don't have one in Brownsville. That university is 60 miles away. And for our kids who don't have access to vehicles, it may as well be 600 miles away, because we can't drive 60 miles every day to go to college. And he looked at me, and he goes, like, he didn't believe me. And I said, Senator, lest you think we're asking for too much. I said, the greater Boston area has over 50 four-year universities. We're just asking for one more. And he didn't believe me. And this is back before the days of Google. So he recessed the committee, and he had his legislative assistant go look it up. And I can remember never being more nervous in my life that maybe I was wrong and maybe I overstated it. And Julia Garcia was right next to me. She goes, no, I think there's that many. I'm pretty sure. And it's like, God, please help me. And so came back after recess, and he asked the clerk, so what did you find out? He goes, well, Mr. Oliveira was wrong. And I thought my heart sank, because you never want to lie to a committee chairman. And he goes, there's actually, I think, 72 or 65 or something. And everybody erupted in laughter, and even the stern chairman laughed too. And he looked at me and he goes, you know what? He goes, I guess one more university down there wouldn't be a bad thing. And so this conservative, lawmaker, he endorsed it. And of course, when the chair, is behind you, usually, the rest of the members will follow. So we got it through Senate Higher Education. House Higher Education was Irma Rangel from Kingsville, and of course she supported us. And so we got a four-year university in Brownsville in 1996. And it's the beginning of a great, moment for higher education in South Texas.
So why was this university so important? I understand that, people can't drive 60 miles to Brownsville.
If you're going to succeed in life, you have to have, the studies that show what the income levels of people with a college education, with a four-year degree or a professional degree, as opposed to somebody who doesn't have one. It's incredible, the earning capacity, or the disparity in earning income if you don't go to college. And so my dad had taught me from a young age, that college is everything, and it's the only way that this Hispanic community is going to rise and enjoy the prosperity of the rest of the nation is they've got to get educated. And so he ingrained that in me, and so I knew we had to do it, and thankfully that we had a lot of support, and we were able to do that. And then of course prior to that time, we had formed a partnership, and it was the first partnership ever formed between a junior college and a university, and it was wildly successful. Time magazine named Dr. Garcia president, one of the top presidents, because of this model that we had. But amazingly enough, 6 years ago, we elected a new board there at the Texas Southwest College, and before it had been a board composed of local business people, lawyers, doctors, and all like-minded. We were committed to this partnership with the University of Texas because they were the wealthiest public university in the United States, and it was very successful. Our kids were getting a great education, and so we realized the importance of it. But these new board members that came in didn't agree and felt like. Didn't want the University of Texas there, so they ended the partnership. We separated, and it was a very, very scary time for higher education in South Texas. And they basically, it was a 4-3 vote. They kicked me out as chair, and these 4 new people decided they wanted to be a freestanding junior college and didn't want anything to do with the University of Texas. So it caused a lot of heartache, and thankfully Dr. Figueroa, who was chancellor at the time, Francisco Figueroa, and Gene Powell, who was chairman of the Board of Regents, got together and said, we got to fix this because this university is going to fail. We can't have a University of Texas system school fail. And so the plan they came up with was to form a new university, combine University of Texas Pan Am and UT Brownsville, and form a new university that would be eligible to get into the PUF fund, the Permanent University Fund. And out of that also we got a new medical school. So thanks to Dr. Figueroa, to the leadership of Dr. Figueroa and Gene Powell, we now have a 4-year university. We have a medical school, and we had $400 million in new money that we would have never gotten had we not gotten into the Permanent University Fund.
Is that recurring? The $400 million?
No, that was startup money, but still, we of course, Permanent University Fund, it can be used for things that other state funding can't, and so it allows you to build, more classrooms, and allows you to build, more administrative buildings and other things that you need, and so we've continued to receive money from them. Obviously, not to that. That was the start. That was basically Dr. Figueroa and Gene Powell said, okay, this is some catch-up money that y'all need to start this new campus, and this is money that you basically were owed because you haven't gotten anything for the last 30 years, and so it was a tremendous. The effect, it's transformed the higher education in the valley, and still some growing pains when you have 2 campuses that are 60 miles apart and trying to figure out scheduling classes and all that, but. I think it's been a success, and it will continue to get better, and our kids will just have so many more opportunities that they didn't have before. I mean, we're looking at trying to get a physical therapy school. We're trying to get an ophthalmology program. All these things that we would have never had access to before. Now that we can see that we're going to get a lot of those programs now, and we're going to continue to expand in opportunities for our kids.
So kind of going back just a little bit, but the relationship between all of your political work and your law practice, and I know that you're on a million different boards, how does all this relate to one another, or does it?
It doesn't. It doesn't. I think, it used to be I wouldn't say no to any board, so I served on the American Heart Association board. I served on different boards, and then I finally, I sat down and said, okay, you only got so much time, and so you have to dedicate your efforts to areas that you really want to, where you think you can make a mark. And so I've tended now to most of my commitment. Besides, I'm on the VITA board that does workforce training here, and I've been on for almost 20 years now, and I've continued on that board. But my focus now has been higher education, and so I'm on the development board of UT, Utrgv. I'm on the athletics council there, and I'm on the medical school advisory board, and so I've tried to focus my fundraising efforts for those areas, and then I've also stayed active with UT Austin, and then I'm on the Chancellor's Council Executive Committee, which is about 200 to 300 people that serve on this committee at the request of the Chancellor, and we meet probably 3 or 4 times a year and do besides fundraising, just discuss a lot of the issues that in higher education, and a lot of things that are going on at the University of Texas, and it's important for people from the Valley to be on it because it traditionally was made up of mostly people whose sole affiliation was to UT Austin. And so we're increasing the membership. We've got a lot more people from South Texas. So we do have the chancellors here. We get to meet with them, and it provides you access to the chancellor and to the chancellor staff that you wouldn't have if you were not on this committee. So spent a lot of time doing that. I've developed a lot of friendships, made a lot of contacts, and And I think as a result of that, whereas we never saw the chancellor down here before Francisco Cigarro, now it's a common occurrence, and they're frequent visitors to our campus, and we can pick up the phone and call them if we need something. So I've tried to focus my efforts on higher education now, whether it's with Utrgv or UT Austin and UT systems where I can get I think have an impact.
Are there any conflicts there?
No, I mean my loyalty is always going to be top loyalty is going to be to Utrgv. I mean, I tell all my friends, I still have a lot of friends down here that all their money goes to UT Austin, for scholarships and all that. And I tell them, I said, it's wonderful that you do that, but those guys have an endowment that's, out of this world. I said, if you give, $1,000 to UT Austin, it's not a blip on their donor screen if you give $1,000 down here, it goes a long way. And I said, it's really felt. And I think and I'm not trying to dissuade people from doing it. I'm telling them they can do both, and I'm telling them, but my loyalty is to Utrgv. I mean, I love University of Texas, Austin, and UT system for the opportunities they gave me. But if I have only so much money to give, it's gonna be down here, because this is where we need to spend the money to develop this university and this medical school, so that we can become competitive and increase all the educational opportunities for our Valley kids.
One thing you had mentioned earlier, before the camera was on, was the evolution of your approach to some of the boards and groups that you've been appointed to.
Yeah, I think earlier in my career I was afraid to rock the boat, and I go along, and I wouldn't speak my mind when I felt like something was wrong. But I think the older I've gotten, I realize that you can't be afraid to rock the boat, and you can't be afraid to question leadership when you think they're wrong. And I've found if you do it in a respectful way, that you don't alienate the people in control. And so I think now I'm quick to point out if I see for instance, I think UT systems could do a lot better job at recruiting minorities, and there is a lack of Hispanics in key leadership positions at the UT system, and at one point that wasn't true. We had a number of deputy chancellors that were Hispanic, and now there's not, and I don't think in any way that's a reflection on whoever the chancellor is, whether it was McRaven or our current chancellor. I just think that they have not made it as top a priority as it should be, and so I think one of my jobs is, one of the things I can do is remind them often that we do need to recruit some Hispanic Latinos and Latinas in leadership positions there at UT system, and I really feel that this new chancellor is receptive to that, and I think he's going to try real hard to change that culture.
Why is that important to have Latinos in these positions?
Well, I think McRaven said it best, is that when you've got Hispanic students or African American students, what greater encouragement for them if they see their professor's Hispanic or their dean of their school is Hispanic. It gives you room for hope, and then you realize, God, if they can do it, I can do it. And I think it's inspirational for a lot of people, and I think I know when I was growing up, whenever I saw a Latino in the faculty position, you think, God, man, what a neat thing, and you really looked up to them. But it also gives you hope, and I think Chancellor McRaven said it best, is that how do you expect our kids, the Hispanics and African Americans, to have any hope of one day becoming a college professor or a college president if you don't have people in those roles? And so it's extremely important, and I think it's incumbent on everybody in higher education to recruit, to train Hispanics so that they're ready for when those positions come up.
How did we become a priority?
It's a difficult question. The one of the biggest ways is the voting booth, and we've got to vote, and people listen. When you go vote, I think we send a strong message, and I think I don't know what the final results are, but I know that a lot of Hispanics voted this last election, and I think they sent a message to a lot of these leaders that hey, we're knocking on the door, and we want to be heard, and we want you to respect our views, and we want you to listen to us. So I think that's number one, is that we have to get our the communities to vote, and vote in the same numbers that the rest of Texas votes, and that other Texans vote in. And I think when we do that, we're gonna get a lot of power. And I think, but even more importantly than that is that we have to continue getting our young people educated, and and getting them to college, and making sure they finish, and not go get caught up working at Target because they want to buy a car, and I mean, I have to say, we can't blame all our educational problems on the Anglo community for keeping us down. There is a mindset that I've seen, and Dr. Garcia and I talk about this often, is that the priorities of some of our folks is that I'd rather have a car than a new car than sacrifice and go to college, and we've got to change that mindset, because I mean, I know part of it is that they don't have the money, but part of it is also is that they don't want to make the sacrifices that we made to go to college, and that our parents made, and we have to teach them that yes, you're going to have to sacrifice for 4 years, but then the rest of your life is going to change forever. And I think it's incumbent on on people like myself who have had the chance to to a great education and I will tell you, I drive my wife and kids crazy, because I'll talk to the waiter and I ask him, "Are you going to college?" "Well, I'm taking 6 hours because I need the money." I said, "Why do you need the money?" I said, "Do you need it to eat?" No, I need it to pay for my car. I need it, to buy all these things. And I tell them, you have to go back full time, and you have to sacrifice. And so I do that all the time. And I think, I know there's a lot of people like me out there that preach that same message. And I think that, the key to empowerment to success for the Hispanic community is going to be in higher education. And now we've got plenty of opportunities. You can't say I don't have any opportunities. We've got plenty of junior colleges, and now a four-year university that has 30,000 students. So there's really and there's a lot of financial aid available. I mean, it's not as much as it could be, but there's enough out there now that if you want to go to school, it's there. There's help for you. So we just have to keep preaching that message, and it's never ending. And and we can't forget that, because you can't stop. You have to keep, and that's the only way that we're gonna become successful and thrive as a community.
Any questions that I've had left?
I think we covered the gamut.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to add?
No, I mean, we covered the spectrum there, so I think we did, and I wish that this had been around when my dad was alive, because we have some recordings of him, but God, he was just we've got some. When my friends that worked at the TV stations, he was interviewed all the time as a college president. They saved some recordings of him and stuff. I'm going to see if I can find them. We had them on VHS tape. I'm going to see if I can find them, because they're priceless. It'd be interviewing him on different issues and stuff. But it would have been neat if somebody had done an oral history of him, because he was a pioneer and in higher education, and he had lots of stories and lots of things to share. A lot of people compared him to the guy from Stand and Deliver, I guess, the role that James Edward almost had. Yeah, except Jaime was a teacher, and within his school he did that. My dad, did it, for a whole community, but he was like, he had that same, he wanted to help out all the kids, and he was just one of those people. He knew everybody, and we'd walk downtown, and he'd see some of these kids smoking a cigarette on the corner, and he'd go get them and say, "You need to get back in school, and I know your parents." And he called their parents up and tell them, "You need to get, Jaimito back in school. He was doing fine. I'll help him out," and he would help him. And then the other thing he did when he became president of the college is that he went back to some of his friends he knew that were smart in high school, but didn't have the opportunity to go. And he goes, "Come back. I'll register you for 2 classes. Just come back." And they'd come back, and they just need somebody to help them. They didn't know how to do that. They didn't know a simple thing like, how do you go register to go back to college? And he would do that, and he did that for the community, and so he had such a lasting impact on higher education in South Texas. I mean, I tell you, when I used to pick juries when I first came out. I mean, some of these people I recognized, but I wasn't sure. And then when the judge would ask, "Does anybody know Mr. Oliveira?" And like half these people raise their hand. I think, I don't know these people. And they think, "Well, is he related to Dr. Onufo Oliveira?" And I say yes. And then he goes, "Oh, your dad, he got me back in school, or he helped my son get a scholarship." And so they tell these testimonials, and the poor attorney on the other side is looking there going, "Oh, great," So, and we end up striking half of them or whatever. And then you always have a few ringers that stay on and stuff. And so, it was funny. I'm seeing less and less of that now because, he died, God, it's been over 30 years and 35 years ago now. And so a lot of people that, I'm seeing on juries didn't know him, and they're too young to remember who he was and stuff. But I have reaped the benefits of all the good work he did, and so I have a brother who's a doctor here, and he reaped those benefits too. And so, but I'm glad to be back home, and I never considered going anywhere else. And hopefully, some of our kids will feel the same way I do, and will want to come back, because that brain drain is always an issue. We've turned out a lot of good kids, but they don't come back.
Is it as much of an issue as it used to be? Because now there's our Utrgv.
Yeah, I think now, especially in the medical community, you're going to see more of them staying because they have opportunities here. And the truth of the matter is, if you're a doctor, doctors make more money here than any place in Texas. They do per capita. I'm per capita, but per profession. You see on average that doctors here, it's an underserved area, and if you're willing to work, you can make a very good living here. You look at the national average for pediatricians, and it's like $183,000. Well, I know pediatricians here that make $1 million, because there's such, it's an underserved area, and you can do volume care, and so I think people are seeing that now. We're starting to have, now that we have a performing arts auditorium, we're starting to have cultural things that, people like. And so I'm seeing more and more people stay, but it's still tough. If your kid goes away and lives in Austin, goes to school in Austin for 4 years, trying to get them to come back after they lived in Austin is tough. And then the only thing that usually causes them to come back is the economic situation. It's hard to, the job situation in Austin is so tough that, and then now it's just becoming, impossible to find affordable housing. And so if you didn't buy a house, 10, 15 years ago or longer, good luck trying to find one now that you can afford that's anywhere close in Austin. So
there's so many people your generation that came back. So it seems like that will happen with this.
I think it will, and I think the more opportunities we have down here, the more people will come back. I think they're starting to realize it's like, you think you go away and think, "Oh, I'm going to live in Austin, I'm going to live in Houston," and then I think what brings a lot of people back is their families are still here, and they start having children, and they realize, it wasn't so bad growing up in the valley, and we didn't have to worry about safety issues and things like that, and so I think we will continue. People will continue to return. I really believe they will, but we got to keep encourage them to come back, and I think they will, because we certainly need many of them to come back, because there is a great need for both in the medical and the legal area.
Do you think it's going to take for them to come back? Job opportunities, but
quality of life too. They look at, okay, what educational opportunities are available for my kids. Public schools. Well, that's another amazing transformation in the valley, is that this new rating system that they use, and they score all these school districts and stuff. We had higher scoring school districts than Austin had this last year. I don't know if you knew that, but we had. City of Edinburgh, Edinburgh School District got an A. Sherryland Independent School District got an A. Brownsville, I think, was like a B plus or maybe an A minus or something. McAllen, got an A rated. We had more A rated school districts than almost any area of the state. It was incredible. And somebody, and the new chancellor was asking me, why is that? What's the explanation? So I think the explanation is that, we have such a, it's so difficult for us down here because we're dealing with parents who are, not formally educated. And so we've had to do, there had to be a lot of community involvement, a lot of parental involvement. And so we've come up with programs where we've worked real hard to get parents involved. And so I think, you see it from from school teachers to administrators. I mean, everybody, gets to know the parents and they get the parents involved. And I think there's been a big push for that. But I think the other thing that we've been so successful is that we're recruiting some of the best superintendents in the state. If you look at how many superintendents that are like in Austin or Round Rock or Dallas now that came from the Rio Grande Valley, it's phenomenal. I mean, we have some incredible talents at the superintendent level, and we've been real lucky. And I think they've been able to recruit good teachers, and then and they've stayed on top of of testing and all that. And so I think you've seen a radical change. So I think that when our kids that leave and they see that, hey, our school districts are now, because that's always a worry, is you want your kids to have, the best opportunity. And if, the schools have improved as much as they have. We have South Texas ISD, these magnet schools that are fabulous. The charter schools, although I'm not a big fan of them, that's still another educational opportunity for students. And so I think, you've seen, the level of education is, and the quality of education has just improved dramatically. I mean, it's been great.
Were you part? I know that while the big lawsuit that MALDEF brought by the Board of Universities against the state of Texas, while it was going on, there was a group of representatives from, and I don't mean like legislative, I mean like community people from around the border and South Texas that were meeting monthly to come up with a plan of what would be their wish list for a university, or what would they want to see. Were you involved in that?
I was involved. I think I had just moved back. I want to say the South Texas Border Initiative was about 1990 or 92, was it?
Yeah.
Is my recollection is when it happened, and I think I had moved back, so I was kind of just starting my legal career and was focusing on that. But shortly thereafter, I got elected to the Texas Southwest College Board, and actually before that, I was participating, on board committees and stuff when all that was happening. And I want to say that happened when Ann Richards was governor, so I knew Governor Richards, and so I got involved then. But I can remember when all that was discussed, and of course the MALDEF lawsuit that we had, that Norma Cantu and Al Kaufman tried. My cousin Renee Oliveira was local counsel in that case and participated, in the trial of that case. And then getting that money from the legislature to do all those things we want. It was tremendous achievement. But I remember one of the things that struck me is that there was a handful of the older Anglo business leaders that were heavily involved in that just believed in it as much as and fought for it as hard as any of the Hispanic community did. And I remember thinking, these are really good people. They care and they want they want the community to do better. And one name that comes to mind is Bobby Duffy. And I can remember him getting up at one of these meetings. And Bobby Duffy was chairman of Texas Commerce Banks in the Rio Grande Valley, and very powerful. But I remember he got up and we were at some legislative reception, whatever, and they were talking about how great this was. He goes, you know what? it's not so great because you should have done this 20 years ago. So quit patting yourselves on the back. And he goes, and this is only the start. You got a long way to go to make up for all the. And when he said it, this banker, this Anglo banker, and he goes, "You've not taken care of the Hispanic community." And he told all these guys, and there were some key legislators there. And I remember thinking, wow, that's. Because that's what you need. You can't. It can't just be a few South Texas guys speaking up. You have to have a unified community. And when they hear business leaders speaking up, I remember him saying that. And I told him later how proud I was of him. And he was one of my dad's oldest friends. It was a pallbearer at my dad's funeral. And he goes, and I told him my dad would be proud of you. And he goes, "Well, I think of your dad. When I'm serving on these committees and stuff. And I think of all he did." So it was an incredible time, and I forget what the amount was that we got. Was it 21 million, or do you remember? But it was a lot of money back then. But you think about now, we got 400 million, and but I will say that 21 million that we got back then was every bit as important, and I believe it was 21 as a number I remember, is every bit as important as the 400 million we got, 3 years ago from the PUP fund from the University of Texas Board of Regents. But yeah, it was, I look at, there's been a number of, events that have occurred in the Valley that transform higher education, getting our first junior college, getting Pan American College, those are all, landmark events. But the South Texas Border Initiative would definitely qualify as one, but I think the biggest one of all would be the creation of Utrgv and the medical school. It's truly transformational, and we've heard the word many times, but it is very appropriate. It's a game changer for us, and so I think it's important that we recognize those people that help us, and that we continue to improve on what we have.
Let me ask you this: why did you move from Brownsville to McAllen?
After the separation of University of Texas Brownsville, Texas Southwest College was probably one of the saddest points of my life, and for Dr. Julia Garcia too, and all of those that lived. And Dr. Sigurdo was devastated because he was the first Hispanic chancellor, and he had high hopes for helping the Rio Grande Valley, and then basically he gets Hispanic Board of Trustees that tell him, "We don't want you here," and so it was devastating. It was a devastating time, and we were all extremely worried what's going to happen to higher education at Brownsville. It was an incredibly reckless move by these trustees, very irresponsible, and they really had no support. I remember when we held the hearing to decide whether to separate. I want to say 46 people signed up to speak on the issue. 43 were against separation. Only 3 were for it. And we had every governmental entity, every city commission, every school board pass a resolution saying keep the partnership together. We had every business entity saying keep the partnership, every business group saying keep the partnership together. And these guys just basically ignored them and decided we're going to destroy this partnership, and it caused incredible havoc. And luckily, we had 2 guardian angels, and Dr. Sigurdo and Gene Powell, and they said, "We're going to fix this, and we're not going to let these 4 reckless people and ruin higher education in South Texas," and they did. Otherwise, and ironically now, they wanted their own school, their own campus. They wanted, it was all about, it was about power. They wanted to be able to make the decisions locally who to hire. And it's sad that, it's a problem that's plagued us in the Valley for years, is that people want that power of giving people jobs and, having that control. And even though, University of Texas System was running an incredible, university for us, but they wanted that power, so they wanted to hire their own president, so they did. And they fired her 3 or 4 years later, I think wrongfully, and a jury thought so too. They awarded $12 million to her because of the way they treated her. So, which I'm smiling, but I'm not happy about it, because I'm sure it'll be appealed. Hopefully, at the end of the day, we won't have to pay that kind of money. But that sent a message to those people, is that you're your actions were very, reckless, and and they clearly were not people who should have been put in a leadership position. And it's sad that we still have that in the valley. That's probably one of the things that the biggest problem we have is good governance. I mean, we get people who run for office for all the wrong reasons, and we're doing better in some communities, but it seems like we revert back to that. That
Who was the president they fired?
Lily Tercero, and she was in the San Antonio Junior College system. She came maybe from a financial background, but we did search, and I wasn't for splitting things up, but I said, well, if we're going to do this, then we need to find a good president. And we had a search committee. We had a consulting group that helped us, and she was qualified, but these four people. And after I stepped off the board, I told my wife, I said, she wanted to move to McAllen for years because her brother and sister were here. I had a thriving law practice here. I was here 3 days a week anyway, and I was just ready for a change. I was really disappointed with with Brownsville for electing these guys, and so I decided to make the move to McAllen, and it's been it's been a nice change. It's made new friends, and met a lot of people, and there's a lot going on up here. So, but I still spend a lot of time in Brownsville. When people ask me where are you from, I almost always say Brownsville.
So the vote to split with the trustees, that was kind of the final.
Yeah, for me it was like it just was such a huge disappointment. I stayed another year after that, but it was like after that I just felt like I don't other than the fact that my mom still lived there, and I just didn't feel like I had anything that tied me there, and so I thought I needed there are a lot of people who felt the way I did. Dr. Robles, who you met last night, he was devastated. He was on the board with me. He stopped going to the meetings after the split because he says, I can't. David, he goes, I'm so stressed out. He's a cardiologist. He goes, I'm so stressed out. I thought I was going to have a heart attack at that last meeting, and he goes, I can't do this anymore. And I can remember Dr. Segodo, he was upset with me. I mean, he knew it wasn't my fault, but he still was upset. And he's like, why couldn't you have stopped this? And I said, because he thought I could do anything, and I couldn't. And I really felt like I disappointed him. But then everything, once we created, we got into PUF Fund and created this new university. It's like, well, all's well that ends well. So I think.
So what I had not understood until right now, that there was any kind of relationship between that split and the creation of what became UTRGV.
The creation of UTRG. Here's the only good thing those trustees, those reckless trustees, did is that they forced UT system to come up with another plan to rescue UT Brownsville. And one of those guys tried to tell me, he's a lawyer, and he tried to tell me, see, what I did was a good thing. Look what happened. I said, you had no way of knowing, any way of knowing that this was going to happen, and it didn't happen because of what you did. It happened because we had to fix the tremendous, screw up that you all caused, but no, I didn't. People have no idea why UTRGV was created, but I think the two main reasons it was created was number one, we had to figure out a way to figure out the problem in UT Brownsville, because they went from having all this income from the junior college, they lost all that, and so now their revenue was way down. You had to split up the campus, all the buildings. Some of the buildings were owned by UT, some were owned by Texas Southwest. It was just a mess. It was just a nightmare to split up the campus. A lot of people lost their job as a result of the split, and so you had to figure out a way, and so that was probably the primary reason UTRGV was created, and secondary was that this is how we got a new medical school, because we needed permanent university funds to fund the medical school, so that's how we did it. So that's it's a story I enjoy telling, and because people have no idea why UTRGV was created, and why we have a medical school, but it's basically as a result of they had to fix what had happened in Brownsville, but it's been an incredible journey.
Yeah. So Dave, is there anything that I have not asked that you think we should ask?
And I'm sorry. I know when I start talking about higher education,
No,
I can't
it's
stop
great.
sometimes. I can't. it's a passion I got from my father, and I wish I could spend more time doing it, and but I do what I can, and I love it, and I'll never stop, and I'm always hounding people, and they go, "Why do you do this?" Because we have to. I mean, we have to keep doing it. We have to keep improving. What I tell people too is like, we're trying to bring a football program down here. Why do you want football? It's so expensive, all that. I said, one of the greatest things of going to UT is that, you can go to a football game if you want. Not all kids went. I mean, my son didn't really care. He didn't go. But you had that luxury, and you can go with all your fellow students, and, you get dressed up. And it's just an incredible weekend, or if it's basketball, or it's soccer, and and so kids at major universities have that opportunity available. I said, our kids should have the same opportunities that everybody else does. And yes, it's going to be expensive, but we'll find a way to fund it. And I mean, which is why I pushed, for a student rec center in Brownsville. It's like people said, "Oh, why do we need a new rec center?" Because one of the greatest things that Ford University has, they have a rec center where you can go work out, you can go play basketball, you can lift weights, you can walk, you can swim. And I said, and it's like having a student union. Why do we need an expensive student union? Because it's a great place to have student events. And, I tell them, that's where I went to Chicano night, once a week. I met a lot of people. And I said, why can't our students, just because we live in South Texas, we don't have a right to do those things, No, I mean, and I think, there's a lot of us that feel that way. And so, because you do run across people who say, why do we need all that? And even some of them are local because they've never experienced it, they don't know. And then when they see it, say, oh, wow, this is exciting. And now you have the same educational experience that people who went to a major university got. And that's what we want down here. We want our kids to have that same experience.
When Julia Garcia was on campus last week, one thing she was telling us about was that she came from UT Brownsville, and she comes to UT Austin, and she's looking at everything, and we don't have that here, we don't have that here.
Yeah.
And that was the sense was, we deserve the same things.
Yeah, we deserve more libraries. Why do we have to have one library?
Yeah, we deserve the same kind of facilities here as they have at UT Austin.
That's what I told that senator is like, we're not asking for any more that they get at UT Austin or A&M, and like there was a mindset is like, well, we can't provide those opportunities for everybody in the state. If they want that, they can come up here. Not realizing how hard it is for kids to get up there, and not everybody can get into those schools, and so changing that mindset. And I mean, I think it's a lot better now. And I was amazed how easily we passed, the Utrgv, how we were able to get the legislation passed. I mean, we only had one person dissent. It was the guy that's in trouble right now, Charles Schwertner, for sexting that UT student. It's kind of ironic. His sister lives here in McAllen. She's married to a really good friend of mine, Janie Murray. And but Schwertner was the only one who voted against it, and he said his reason for it is that we don't have enough GME programs, the graduate medical programs, and so therefore we shouldn't be opening medical schools. That we're not going to have residency programs for them to go to and stuff. And it's like, well, then create more. I mean, don't vote against it, but yeah, it was amazing. We got unanimous approval, and and I'll give credit to Governor Perry too. Once he saw the idea, he says, I like this, and Gene Powell convinced him this is going to be great for South Texas. He got behind it and championed it, and it really was a good time to see leaders in both parties saying this is a good thing and it's overdue. It gave me, and it's funny, I told somebody, and somebody said, why are you, praising the Republicans so much? I said, because when the Democrats are in control, they didn't give us any of this. I mean, I'm not saying this is a result of Republican leadership, but it happened when they're in control. And I said, so I'm going to give them credit, I mean, they at the end of the day, they voted to make it happen. And so you have to give them credit for supporting us. And hopefully they'll continue, whoever's in power continues to support our efforts to expand educational opportunities down here.